5 men in $1,000 suits pinned Daisy Francis to the mahogany table, their laughter echoing off marble walls, certain their political immunity would protect them. But when the biometric locks clicked shut and the man in the bespoke silk suit stepped from the shadows, their laughter died instantly. What Seo Sang-woo did next didn't just stop them. He turned every camera on, broadcasting their sins to the massive billboards of downtown Chicago, shattering the city's peace forever. Oud wood incense and imported leather, that's what the Dominion always smelled like. Expensive, exclusive, and entirely removed from the Chicago streets 40 floors below. This wasn't the kind of club where you walked in off the street. You needed an invitation, a reference, and a bank account that could cover the monthly membership fee without blinking. Tonight, though, something felt wrong. The air carried a charge, like the pressure drop before a tornado touches down. Daisy Francis gripped the edge of the bar, her fingernails digging small crescents into the lacquered surface. Shift number 8. She'd made it through 7 without incident, keeping her head down, memorizing exits, counting her breaths when the enclosed VIP section made her lungs tighten. At 24, she'd learned that survival meant becoming a ghost. Quiet, forgettable, invisible. Her reflection in the mirrored backsplash showed someone trying too hard to disappear. Hair pulled severely back, white shirt buttoned high, eyes that tracked every movement in the room without ever making direct contact. She'd left 3 cities to escape her past. She'd changed her name twice. She needed this job because it paid cash, asked no questions, and let her work in a space so heavily secured that no one could touch her. Except she was wrong about that last part. 1, 2, 3, 4. She counted silently, the rhythm her therapist taught her, the only thing that stopped the walls from crushing inward when panic hit. The VIP section felt smaller tonight. The 12-foot ceilings felt lower. The frosted glass partitions between tables suddenly seemed too thin. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. A regular approached the bar, mid-50s, expensive suit that hung slightly wrong on the left side where he concealed. Daisy had cataloged this detail 3 shifts ago, along with the pale band of skin on his ring finger where a wedding band should be but wasn't tonight. His eyes tracked the room the same way hers did, always calculating exits, always assessing threats. McAllen, 25. Neat, he ordered without looking at her. Daisy stepped behind the bar to pour. With the lead bartender stuck in traffic due to the storm warnings, she was covering both the floor and the rail tonight. She poured with practiced precision, her hands steady despite the sweat gathering at her hairline. She could feel the phantom pressure building in her chest, even though nothing was happening. This was the cost of hypervigilance. Her body couldn't tell the difference between scanning for actual danger and the exhausting ritual of cataloging details that might never matter. The man's jacket shifted as he reached for his glass, and she glimpsed the edge of a concealed carry permit clipped to his belt. Former law enforcement, probably, the kind of patron who came to the Dominion because they understood the value of discretion. She noted the exit behind the bar. 12 steps, unlocked, leads to the service corridor. The emergency exit by the restrooms. 15 steps, alarmed but functional. The main elevator, 20 steps, requires keycard access after 10 p.m. Her mind mapped escape routes the way other people memorized phone numbers, an exhausting geography of survival she couldn't turn off. The regular left a generous tip without making eye contact, and Daisy allowed herself 3 deep breaths before the next order came. Her shirt clung to her back with nervous perspiration. Her jaw ached from clenching. Even on quiet nights, her body remained coiled tight, waiting for the blow that her anxiety promised was always coming. She wasn't a spy. She was a survivor. And tonight, that distinction was about to become catastrophically irrelevant. At 8:47 p.m., the private elevator chimed. Daisy's entire body went rigid. Every instinct screamed danger before the doors even opened. She forced her shoulders down, arranged her face into professional neutrality, and waited. What emerged wasn't the usual tech executives or finance bros. It was power. Raw, entitled, and absolutely certain of its own immunity. 5 men stepped into the VIP lounge like they owned the oxygen. The one in front looked like a senator, silver threading through his dark hair, a suit that cost someone's annual salary, and the kind of smile that had signed legislation destroying lives while cameras flashed. Behind him, 4 younger versions, sharks trailing a bigger predator, hoping for scraps. They didn't wait for seating. They moved toward the corner booth, the one with soundproof glass and a view that made people feel like gods surveying their kingdom. Nobody in the room made eye contact. The wealthy couple 3 tables away suddenly became fascinated with their champagne. The tech investor hunched over his laptop. The instinct was universal and immediate. Become small, go unnoticed, survive. Daisy understood that instinct intimately. She'd lived by it for 3 years. Service, the silver-haired man said. Not to Daisy specifically. To the air. To the concept of service itself. She was the only server on the floor. The manager was in the wine cellar. Security was changing shifts. For the next 10 minutes, she was alone with these men. Daisy grabbed 5 menu portfolios and crossed the floor, each step measured, controlled. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Dominion. They didn't acknowledge her greeting. They arranged themselves in the booth, spreading out aggressively, claiming territory. The silver-haired leader looked up at Daisy with eyes that assessed her the way someone might evaluate furniture. You're new here. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. May I bring you something to drink? Daisy kept her gaze on her notepad, pen ready. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Daisy's throat tightened. 1, 2, 3. She lifted her eyes, meeting his stare for exactly 1 second before dropping them again. Respectful, submissive, unthreatening. Bourbon, top shelf. And tell me, he leaned back, smile widening. Do you know who I am? No, sir. Good, let's keep it that way. The other men laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Daisy turned to leave, but her trained eye, always cataloging details, always looking for threats, caught something wrong. One of the younger men was pulling a small black object from his jacket. Another man's hand came up to receive it. A transfer, quick, practiced. SIM cards. They were swapping SIM cards. Daisy's mind, sharpened by years of hypervigilance, recorded everything. The scratched casing, the nervous glance, the way they palmed the devices like contraband. She didn't know what was on them, but she knew that whatever made powerful men this careful was dangerous. She moved toward the bar. Her hand was shaking. Wait, the voice cracked like a whip. Daisy stopped, ice flooding her veins. Come back here. She turned slowly. The silver-haired man was standing now, and his smile had vanished. Empty your pockets. I'm sorry? Daisy's voice came out smaller than she intended. You heard me. You saw something. Now empty your pockets. Sir, I didn't. Now. The other 4 stood up, forming a wall between Daisy and the exit. The soundproof glass that had seemed like a luxury feature now became a prison. No one outside could hear. No one would help. Daisy's hands trembled as she reached into her apron. Pen, notepad, order pad. She laid them on the table, the other pocket. Her heart stopped. Earlier, when she'd cleared their empty glasses, she'd swept debris from the table into her apron out of habit. She'd forgotten to empty it. The SIM card was in there, I said. The man grabbed her wrist, his grip crushing. Empty it. Please, I didn't take anything. You saw us. You saw what we were doing. His voice dropped to something cold and final. That makes you a problem. Before Daisy could scream, before she could run, they moved. 3 of them surrounded her. The leader grabbed her by the shoulders, and then they slammed her down onto the table. The impact drove the air from her lungs. The world tilted. Hands pinned her arms. Someone's palm pressed between her shoulder blades, holding her flat against the wood. She couldn't breathe. The booth's enclosed space collapsed inward. The walls, the ceiling, no air, no space, can't breathe. Check her pockets. Find it. Rough hands rifled through her apron. One of them pulled out his phone, camera flash going off. They were documenting this. Or worse, enjoying it. Daisy's vision started to tunnel. Black spots bloomed at the edges. This was it. This was how she died. Suffocated by her own panic while powerful men erased evidence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Found it, someone said, holding up the small black case. She had it. Stupid girl, the leader hissed in her ear. Did you really think you could? The lights went out. Not flickered, not dimmed. Died completely, along with every screen, every sound system, every digital device in the VIP section. Then came the sound of a lock. Not a key turning, something electronic, biometric. Every exit in the section sealed simultaneously with a hydraulic hiss. The air pressure in the room shifted instantly. A hydraulic hiss followed by the heavy metallic thud of magnetic seals engaging. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating. The kind of silence that precedes a predator's strike. The men froze. What the? Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. And in that crimson glow, Daisy saw him. A man rose from the corner booth, the one hidden behind frosted glass, the one she'd assumed was empty. He was Korean, maybe 40, wearing a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like armor. His collar was open, revealing ink that crawled up his neck. Symbols she didn't recognize but somehow understood meant violence. He didn't walk toward them. He approached. Each step was measured, predatory, absolutely silent despite the marble floor. The silver-haired leader released Daisy, stepping back. This is a private matter. You need to. The man in the charcoal suit reached the security panel beside the booth. He pressed his thumb against it. Every camera in the room swiveled, red recording lights blazing to life. Then he looked at the 5 men, his expression empty of everything except a cold, terrible calculation. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely final. You made a mistake tonight, not attacking her. His eyes never left the leader's face. Your mistake was doing it in my club, where I could see it, where everyone in this city is about to see it. One of the men laughed nervously. You can't. I'm broadcasting this live to every network in Chicago. Seo Sang-woo pulled out his phone, tapped twice, and suddenly the men's faces appeared on the enormous screens visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Their images projected across downtown. Let's see how untouchable you really are. Then he moved. And what happened in the next 30 seconds would make Daisy Francis the most talked-about woman in Chicago, and the most hunted. The penthouse smelled like rain, and something darker. Aged leather, tobacco smoke that had seeped into expensive furniture over years, and underneath it all, the metallic tang of violence barely scrubbed away. Daisy's shoes left wet prints on marble so polished she could see her reflection distorted beneath her feet. She wasn't in a hospital. She should have been in a hospital. Instead, she stood 47 floors above Chicago, while the city rioted over what Seo Sang-woo had broadcast. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see news helicopters circling like vultures, their searchlights cutting through the storm. Her face was on every screen downtown, the waitress who'd been saved, the woman who'd started a war. Seo moved through the space like he owned gravity itself. He'd removed his jacket, rolled his sleeves to reveal more of that ink crawling up his forearms. Symbols that looked like prayers and threats written in the same hand. His knuckles were split, blood dried in the creases. He hadn't cleaned them, hadn't acknowledged them. You'll stay here, he said, without looking at her. Not a question, a fact being delivered. Daisy's fingers curled against her palms. 1, 2, 3. The counting wasn't working anymore. The space was too big and somehow still suffocating. I need to go home. You don't have a home. Seo poured himself whiskey, the crystal decanter catching light like a weapon. Now that your face is on every screen. The senator's people have already run facial recognition. They found your alias, your address, your workplace, and every cafe where you buy coffee and pretend you're not memorizing exit routes. Her breath caught. He'd been watching her. Before tonight, before everything. There's a room prepared. He gestured toward a hallway that seemed to stretch into darkness. Everything you need is there. What if I refuse? The question hung between them. And for the first time since the elevator, Seo looked directly at her. His eyes were the color of dark coffee, almost black, and they catalogued her the way she catalogued threats, systematically, missing nothing. You won't. He set down his glass with a sound like a gavel. Because you're smart enough to know that the only thing more dangerous than being with me right now is being anywhere else. He was right. Daisy hated that he was right. The room he led her to was beautiful in the way museum pieces were beautiful. Untouchable, cold, meant to be observed rather than lived in. Cream walls, a bed large enough to get lost in, and a door that locked from the outside. She heard the mechanism click into place after Seo left. That distinctive sound of a biometric seal engaging. Her heart immediately began to race. The walls weren't moving. She knew the walls weren't moving. But her body didn't care about logic. Her body remembered every small space she'd ever been trapped in. Every locked door. Every moment when breathing became a privilege instead of a right. The high thread count sheets that dressed the king-sized bed felt less like comfort and more like a shroud waiting to be pulled over her face. The silence of the soundproofed room pressed against her eardrums until she could hear nothing but the roaring ocean of blood rushing through her veins. No street noise, no sirens, no human sounds to remind her she was still connected to the living world. She tried to ground herself the way her therapist had taught her. Touch something real. Daisy pressed her palm against the floor-to-ceiling window, expecting warmth, finding only cold glass between her and a 47-story drop. The rain streaked down the outside, each droplet catching city lights as it fell. She started counting them. 1, 2, 3, trying to anchor herself to something. Anything that wasn't the crushing sensation of the room, growing smaller with each breath. The luxury was suffocating. The cream-colored walls were too perfect, too smooth, like the interior of a jewelry box designed to display precious things that had no agency of their own. The recessed lighting provided a soft glow that should have been comforting but instead felt like being trapped inside an expensive coffin. Her reflection in the darkened television screen across from the bed showed a woman she barely recognized. Hair disheveled, eyes too wide, skin pale as bone. She looked like a ghost haunting a space too beautiful for the living. 1, 2, 3, 4. The counting fractured. Black spots bloomed at the edges of her vision. She wouldn't scream. Screaming was weakness. Instead, Daisy walked to the center of the room and sat down on the pristine carpet, forcing her spine straight, her breathing deliberate. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, out for 8. The pattern her therapist had taught her when medication stopped working. In a room 3 walls away, Seo watched her on a monitor. He watched the monitor with the clinical detachment of a scientist, yet his fingers drummed a restless rhythm against the desk. He expected chaos. Screams, broken vases, pleas for mercy. Instead, he found a discipline that mirrored his own. It unsettled him. It fascinated him. Seo Sengwoo had expected hysteria, tears, the kind of breakdown that confirmed his suspicion that she was a plant, a spy sent to infiltrate his operation, with a vulnerability so convincing it had to be manufactured. But Daisy Francis sat in the center of his guest room, like she was meditating in a war zone, her shoulders shaking with the effort of controlled breathing, her eyes open and fixed on some distant point only she could see. She didn't touch the food his staff brought, didn't try the door again, just sat there, hour after hour, until the storm outside broke and pale dawn light crept across the floor. Seo found himself unable to look away from the screen. There was something hypnotic about her stillness, something that reminded him of the way prey animals freeze when cornered, not out of surrender, but out of a calculation more sophisticated than flight. At 6 a.m., he unlocked her door and entered. Daisy's head turned slowly. Her eyes were bloodshot, exhausted, but clear. She'd been awake all night, he realized, fighting her own mind in silence. "Who sent you?" His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "No one." Her response came immediately, no hesitation. "I just wanted to go home. People don't just end up at the Dominion. You needed a reference, a background check. Someone vetted you. Your hiring manager vetted me. Chen from HR. I have pay stubs if you want proof I'm not interesting enough to spy on anyone." Seo moved closer. He could smell her fear now, sharp, honest. Nothing like the perfumed courage of trained operatives. The SIM cards those men were trading. Where are they? Daisy's expression shifted. Not guilt, recognition. "I saw them swap something. I didn't know what it was, but you took it." "No." She shook her head, and for the first time he saw her hands trembling. "I swept their table when they weren't looking. Whatever they dropped probably went into my apron, but Her voice cracked. "I wasn't stealing. I just clean tables. That's all I do. Clean and survive and try not to be noticed." Seo studied her face. The exhaustion carved into her features, the way she held herself together with visible effort, like a building on the verge of collapse that refused to fall simply out of spite. She wasn't a spy. She was something far more dangerous. A witness. An innocent. The kind of complication that turned calculated moves into chaos. "You can't leave," he said finally. "Not until we find those cards." The men in that room weren't lobbyists having a bad night. They were moving state secrets. And now someone has them. That's not my problem. It became your problem when they put their hands on you in my club. Seo's voice dropped to something colder. It became my problem when I put their faces on every screen in Chicago. We're connected now, Daisy Francis. Whether you want to be or not. The way he said her name, precise, almost clinical, made her skin prickle. "So what happens now?" she whispered. Seo reached for the door, pausing in the threshold. Now you tell me everything you remember about that night. Every face, every word, every detail you cataloged while you were counting to keep from screaming. He left the door open behind him. Not an escape, an invitation. Daisy sat alone in the pale morning light, finally allowing herself to shake. The city burned slow while Daisy slept. Not with fire, with information. The video CO had broadcast looped on every news channel, edited down to brutal highlights that made suburban families choke on their breakfast cereal. Politicians called for investigations. Civil rights groups praised the exposure. Criminal networks recognized the message CO had sent. Touch what's mine and I'll make your destruction art. Daisy woke to the smell of coffee she hadn't made and clothes she hadn't chosen laid out on the chair beside her bed. Silk blouse the color of midnight, trousers that are probably worth more than her security deposit. A note in precise handwriting. Wear these. We have work to do. She showered in a bathroom larger than her studio apartment, avoiding her reflection in the mirror. The bruises on her arms had deepened to purple-black. Her wrists bore the imprint of fingers that had held her down. She scrubbed her skin until it hurt, until the hot water ran cold, until she could pretend the trembling in her hands was from temperature instead of memory. The clothes fit perfectly. Of course they did. Seo seemed like the kind of man who knew measurements the way generals knew troop numbers, precisely and without asking. She found him in an office that overlooked the city's steel and glass heart. He stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean that sounded like music and threats in equal measure. When he noticed her, he ended the call without farewell. Sit. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Daisy remained standing. Small rebellion. Pointless, probably. But she needed to prove she still had choices, even if they were only symbolic. Seo's mouth curved. Not quite a smile. You're more trouble than you look. Good. That almost smile widened for half a second before vanishing. My people searched the VIP room, tore apart the booth where those men sat, checked the footage from every angle. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. The SIM cards are gone. Daisy's stomach dropped. That's impossible. I saw them. I believe you saw them. But they're not there now. Which means either someone cleaned the scene before my team arrived, or... His gaze sharpened. You moved them. I told you. I didn't. Then where are they, Daisy? He moved closer, not threatening, but intense enough to make her step back, because those cards contain intelligence that several governments and 3 criminal organizations would kill to possess. And the longer they're missing, the more people die looking for them. Her mind raced backward through the chaos of that night. The moment she'd swept the table, the weight of something small and solid sliding into her apron pocket. The panic when she realized what she'd done. This wasn't just about her anymore. The realization settled in her stomach like lead, heavy and cold and impossible to ignore. She'd tried so hard to be invisible, to move through the world leaving no footprints, disturbing no currents. And her one act of clumsiness, one mindless sweep of a table, had shifted the geopolitical balance of Chicago's underworld, like a hand tipping over the first domino, in an elaborate pattern she couldn't see the end of. How many people would die because she'd been too anxious to stand still? How many families would lose someone because she'd automatically cleaned a table without thinking? The irony was suffocating. She'd spent 3 years making herself disappear, and her greatest act of invisibility, the muscle memory routine of a competent server, had made her more visible, more consequential, than any deliberate action ever could have. The scale of it pressed against her chest, making breathing difficult in a way that had nothing to do with her claustrophobia. This wasn't a panic attack. This was the crushing weight of being responsible for chaos she never intended to create, for violence she couldn't prevent, for deaths that would happen in the dark corners of a war she didn't understand and hadn't chosen. And then, the ice bucket, she breathed. CO went very still. What? Table 4. When they cornered me, I panicked. I knew I had the cards in my apron, and I knew they were going to search me. I grabbed the ice bucket from table 2 to look busy. She swallowed hard. I dumped the contents of my apron into the ice, quarters, pens, and the cards, trying to hide them. Then I tripped and shoved the bucket toward table 4 just before they slammed me down. Table 4. Seo's expression transformed into something colder. Repeat that. The corner booth by the... Why? What's wrong? He was already moving, pulling up security footage on a screen that rose from his desk with mechanical precision. His fingers flew across the keyboard, rewinding, scanning. Then he stopped. The frame showed a table Daisy had walked past a dozen times that night without really seeing. 3 men in understated suits. No flash, no performance. Just quiet power that didn't need to announce itself. "Do you know who this is?" Seo's voice had gone deadly quiet. Daisy leaned closer. The man at the center of the frame had silver threading through black hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of face that looked more like a professor than a criminal. "No. Should I?" Jiang Wei, head of the Heaven's Gate Triad. My oldest enemy. Seo's jaw clenched. "You didn't just lose state secrets, Daisy. You handed them to the one person in this city who would use them to destroy everything I've built." The weight of what she'd done crashed over her. Not intentional, not even careless. Just the universe's cruel timing transforming an innocent mistake into a catalyst. "I didn't know," she whispered. "No, you didn't." Seo pulled up more footage, tracking the Triad's movements after the incident. But Zhang did. Look, the screen showed Zhang's table in the aftermath. One of his men bent down near the overturned ice bucket, retrieving something small and dark. The timestamp read, 8:52 p.m. 3 minutes after Seo had started breaking bones. He has them. Daisy's voice sounded distant to her own ears. He has them. And by now he's analyzed them, copied them, and distributed the information to buyers I can't touch. Seo turned to face her fully. "You didn't start a gang war, Daisy. You armed my enemy with the key to dismantling every protection I've built." She should have felt guilt, shame. Instead, she felt something sharper. Anger. "I didn't ask to be in your club. I didn't ask to serve corrupt politicians or witness their crimes. I didn't ask to be saved by someone whose enemies are worse than the men who attacked me." Her voice rose. "I just wanted to make rent and survive another month invisible. So forgive me if I'm not apologizing for ruining your empire while I was busy trying to breathe through a panic attack." Silence stretched between them. Outside, sirens wailed. Background noise to a city that never stopped bleeding. Then Seo laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was rough, unused, like machinery starting after years dormant. "You have a spine after all." "I've always had a spine." Daisy's hands were shaking again, but she didn't hide them. "I just learned to bend it to survive, then stop bending." He moved to a cabinet, pulling out files thick with information. "Zhang will move on the intelligence within 72 hours. We need to know what he knows before he acts. And the only person who can identify his exact associates from that night, the men who picked up the cards, is you. You want me to help you?" "I want you to help yourself." Seo spread photographs across the desk. Faces. Dozens of them. "Zhang's operation is extensive. But you have something my network doesn't. You were there. You saw who sat at that table. You memorized details you don't even realize you cataloged." He was right. Daisy's hypervigilance was a curse in most moments. But now it was valuable. She stepped closer to the desk, studying the faces. Third from the left. He was wearing a ring with a red stone. And him, she pointed. Scar above his left eyebrow shaped like a fishhook. Seo's expression shifted to something almost like respect. "You're certain?" "Fear makes for an excellent memory, Mr. Seo. When you spend your life waiting for the blow to fall, you tend to memorize the hand that holds the weapon." He gathered the identified photographs. "Then we have leverage. Not much, but enough to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" "Your freedom." Seo met her eyes. "Help me recover what we lost, and I'll make sure you can disappear. New name, new city, resources to start over somewhere Zhang's reach doesn't extend." It was a good offer. Generous, even. So why did it feel like another cage? "And what happens to you?" The question escaped before Daisy could stop it. Seo smiled then, and it was the saddest expression she'd ever seen on a human face. "I stay here and fight a war that started long before you walked into my club. Same as always." He turned back to his window, dismissing her, but Daisy didn't leave. She stood there, studying the line of his shoulders, the tension in his spine, the way even predators carried their own weight. "What if I don't want to disappear?" she heard herself say. Seo looked back, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "Then you're more foolish than I thought. Maybe." Daisy picked up one of the photographs. Jiang Wei's calm, professorial face. "Or maybe I'm tired of running from everything. Maybe for once. I want to see how the fight ends." The air between them changed texture, became heavier. "The fight ends with bodies, Daisy. It always does. Then teach me how not to be one of them." 3 days passed like a held breath. Daisy learned to navigate Seo's penthouse in the strange intimacy forced by proximity. Learned which floorboards creaked, which windows offered the best view of the city's electric veins, which hours Seo spent on the phone speaking languages that sounded like elegant violence. She learned he took his coffee black at 5 a.m. sharp, that he never slept more than 4 hours, that the tattoos crawling up his neck continued down his spine in a design she'd glimpsed once when he'd emerged from his office with his shirt half unbuttoned, ink depicting what looked like a dragon devouring its own tail. She learned that safety was an illusion even here. Especially here. On the 4th morning, Seo found her in the library. A room lined with books in 6 languages, most of them appearing unread except for a single shelf containing worn volumes of Korean poetry. She'd been examining them when he entered, already dressed in charcoal gray, smelling like rain and something expensive. "I have to meet with the Southside crew," he said without preamble. "Intelligence suggests Zhang is moving shipments through their territory. I need to confirm." Daisy set down the book. "You're telling me this why? Because you can't come with me, and because Han will be here to ensure you stay safe." He gestured to the hallway where a man stood. Mid-30s, unremarkable features, the kind of face that disappeared in crowds. "He's been with me 8 years. I trust him with my life." Something in Daisy's chest tightened. Not attraction. Warning. "When will you be back?" 4 hours, maybe 5. Seo moved closer, and for a moment, she thought he might touch her face, might offer some gesture of reassurance. Instead, he just looked at her with those depthless eyes. "Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone." "I never do anything smart, so we're safe." That almost smile again, gone before it fully formed. Then he left, taking some essential gravity with him. The penthouse felt larger without Seo in it. Emptier. Daisy wandered the halls, aware of Han's presence tracking her peripherally. Professional, distant, exactly as a bodyguard should be. Except something felt wrong. The wrongness wasn't obvious at first. Just a prickling at the base of her skull. The same instinct that had kept her alive through 3 cities and 2 name changes. Han stood too close to doorways, not blocking them exactly, but positioned in a way that would make it difficult to pass quickly. His hand kept drifting to his jacket pocket, fingers brushing something there with the unconscious repetition of a man checking that his weapon was still accessible. But it was the way he watched her that made Daisy's anxiety spike from background noise to alarm. Not the professional surveillance of a bodyguard tracking a protectee's movements. Something hungrier. More calculating. Like he was evaluating not just where she was, but what she might try to do. How quickly he could stop her. What excuses he might give afterward. Daisy moved from the library to the living room, then to the kitchen, testing her hypothesis. Each time she relocated, Han followed at a consistent distance, close enough to reach her in seconds, far enough to seem unobtrusive. A professional would vary the distance, would occasionally check other rooms, would maintain the illusion of casual supervision. Han's surveillance was precise, unwavering, wrong. Her therapist's voice echoed in her memory. "Trust your instincts. Your anxiety lies sometimes, but your gut doesn't." 1, 2, 3. When Han suggested she rest in her room, "You look tired, Miss Francis." The hair on her arms stood up. She went anyway. What choice did she have? But she left the door cracked, positioned herself where she could see the hallway through the gap, and waited. 20 minutes later, she heard it. The distinctive sound of the biometric lock disengaging from the outside. Han entered, and he was smiling. Not the professional distance from before. Something uglier, hungrier. "You really thought Seo would protect you?" He closed the door, and Daisy heard the manual lock click. "He doesn't protect anything except his empire. Seo will kill you for this." Her voice came out steadier than her heartbeat. "Seo won't know. Accidents happen. Women like you, traumatized, unstable. Sometimes they hurt themselves." He pulled a knife from his jacket, 6 inches of blackened steel. "Sometimes they fall from penthouse windows before anyone can stop them." The walls began closing. The ceiling pressed down. Daisy's vision fractured into tunnel vision, black roses blooming at the edges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Han moved fast for a large man, crossing the distance between them in 2 strides. Daisy stumbled backward, her spine hitting the vanity table, perfume bottles rattling with the impact. No escape. The window was sealed, the door locked. He was trained, armed, certain. She was none of those things, but she was desperate. As Han raised the knife, Daisy's hand closed around something cold and heavy. A crystal perfume bottle. Vintage. Probably worth thousands. She didn't think. Didn't calculate. Just grabbed and sprayed. She didn't hesitate. She gripped the heavy crystal like a grenade and pressed the atomizer. The mist wasn't a gentle cloud. It was a pressurized jet of vintage alcohol and bergamot oils that hit his corneas with the stinging force of acid. He screamed. Actually screamed. The knife clattered to the floor as his hands flew to his face, the essential oils and alcohol mixing into something caustic enough to blind. Daisy didn't wait to see if it was permanent. She scrambled past him, slammed her palm against the emergency panel beside the door. Red button. Glass cover. Shatter it now. And the alarm shrieked to life. Han was still screaming, stumbling, reaching for her blindly when the door exploded inward. Co entered like violence given form. His suit was perfect, his hair undisturbed. But his eyes were the coldest thing Daisy had ever seen. He looked at Han. At Daisy. At the perfume bottle still clutched in her shaking hand. Explain, he said quietly. Quickly. Han tried to speak, eyes streaming, voice broken. With a knife? Co picked up the blade, examining it with professional detachment. With the door locked from inside? Sir, You betrayed me. Not a question. A eulogy. You let those men into my club. You told them when the security shift changed. You delivered Daisy to them. Han's face confirmed what his mouth couldn't. Guilt. Fear. The desperate calculation of a cornered animal. Who bought you? Seo's voice never rose. Somehow that made it worse. Jung? The senator's people? Jung promised me. He didn't finish. Seo moved with the same economical precision he'd shown in the VIP room, and Han collapsed like someone had cut his strings. Not dead. Unconscious. Breathing, but barely. Then So turned to Daisy. She was shaking violently now, adrenaline crashing through her system, turning her knees to water. She wanted to sit down, wanted to scream, wanted to rewind 4 days and never walk into the Dominion at all. Instead, she just stood there, clutching an empty perfume bottle like a talisman. Co crossed the space between them, and for the first time since that night in the club, he touched her. His hands came up to her face, cupping her jaw, tilting her head back so he could examine her for injury. His hands were cold. Hers were burning. Did he hurt you? The question came out rough. No, the perfume. I remembered the alcohol content would. Words tumbled out disjointed, her mind trying to explain while her body still thought she was dying. Breathe, Daisy. Not a command, a reminder. You're safe. I'm not. I'm never safe. Not here. Not anywhere. They keep finding me. The panic she'd held at bay finally broke through. I did everything right. I was invisible. I didn't make trouble. And they still... I know. Co's thumbs brushed her cheekbones, impossibly gentle for hands that had just destroyed a man. I know. And I'm sorry. That apology hurt worse than any blow. Because it was sincere. Because it meant he understood she'd been collateral damage in wars that preceded her existence. Why did you come back? She whispered. Because something felt wrong. His eyes searched hers. Because I've learned to trust my instincts. And because... He stopped, jaw clenching. Because? Because the thought of you alone and unprotected made me drive 40 miles above the speed limit. The admission hung between them. Too honest, too raw. Daisy felt something crack open in her chest. Not love. Not yet. But recognition. The kind two broken things have when they realize they're fractured along similar lines. What happens now? She asked. Co released her face, stepping back, and she immediately missed the cold of his hands. Now you learn to protect yourself. No more relying on luck or improvised weapons. His gaze dropped to the perfume bottle, though that was inspired. I was terrified. Terror can make us brilliant. He moved to the door, where his men were dragging Han's unconscious form away. Starting tomorrow, you train. Combat, weapons, strategy, everything I know. Why? He looked back, and his expression was the saddest she'd ever seen. Because I can't promise to always come back in time. The dress was black silk that moved like water, cut to hide the healing bruises on Daisy's arms while highlighting the strength she'd started building. 2 weeks of training with Seo's people had carved new lines into her body, muscle where softness had been, calluses on her palms from knife work, a confidence in her stance she'd never possessed before. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Not just physically. Something behind her eyes had changed. hardened and sharpened simultaneously. "You'll draw attention," Co said from the doorway, immaculate in black tie that cost more than a car. "Isn't that the point?" Daisy turned, catching his gaze in the reflection. "I'm bait. You're a message. There's a difference." He approached, pulling a velvet box from his jacket. Inside sat a necklace. Diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. "This has a tracker. And a panic button. Press the center stone, and I'll know." She let him fasten it around her throat, hyper-aware of his fingers brushing her skin, the scent of his cologne mixing with the city night air flowing through the open window. "The governor will be there," he continued, voice clinical, professional. "Senator Morgan, half the city council. They're all implicated in the intelligence Zhang now possesses." His hands lingered on her shoulders. "Which means they all want you dead." Comforting. "You wanted to fight instead of run." His breath moved her hair. "This is what fighting looks like." The gala was held at the Blackstone Hotel's ballroom, a space so opulent it felt like stepping inside a jewelry box. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars, marble floors polished to mirrors, a string quartet playing something mournful and beautiful. Daisy's training kicked in immediately, cataloging exits, identifying security, noting faces. There, the governor with her practiced smile and empty eyes. There, businessmen who'd built empires on exploitation. There, socialites who purchased morality with charity galas while funding nightmares behind closed doors. Co's hand settled on her lower back, a brand of heat through silk. "Stay close. Smile. Act like you're exactly where you want to be." She channeled every acting lesson she'd absorbed from watching powerful women pretend their cages were thrones. Smiled when introduced. Made small talk about nothing. A portly man in his 60s approached with champagne-flushed cheeks and the aggressive friendliness of someone who'd never been told no. "And who is this vision?" he asked Co. But his eyes never left Daisy's body. Inventorying, assessing, reducing her to an object even as he spoke to her like a person. "A colleague," Co said smoothly. "A colleague who wears Cartier." The man gestured to her necklace with proprietary familiarity. "You have excellent taste, Co. In business and accessories." Accessories. Daisy smiled with every tooth. Mr. Co values functionality over aesthetics. "The necklace has a panic button. Would you like a demonstration?" The man's jovial expression froze. Co's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her back. Warning or approval? She couldn't tell. That is, excuse me." The man retreated into the crowd. Inside her head, Daisy's commentary ran acidic and sharp. "Man who treats women like decorative furniture surprised when furniture talks back. Film at 11. She lifted her champagne, still full, still untouched, because control mattered more than the pleasant buzz everyone else chased, and let the warmth of the crystal glass anchor her to reality. The crowd here understood power the way sharks understood blood in water. They could sense weakness, vulnerability, the small tells that marked someone as prey. Daisy had spent 2 weeks learning to move like a predator instead, and now she deployed it. Spine straight, chin level, eyes that met gazes without flinching or apologizing for taking up space. But beneath the armor, she was still the woman who counted exits and memorized which servers looked nervous, which security guards shifted weight onto their dominant leg before reaching for their weapons, which attendees touched their phones too frequently like they were waiting for orders. She was still afraid. She'd just learned to wear fear like camouflage instead of letting it wear her. The governor approached 40 minutes in, gliding through the crowd like a shark in an evening gown. "Mr. Co." Her voice dripped politeness. "I'm surprised to see you at a civic function after your recent publicity." Public service seemed appropriate. Co's smile never reached his eyes. Given how public certain crimes have become, crimes are what courts decide. The governor's gaze slid to Daisy, something cold flickering there. "And courts require credible witnesses. I wonder how many of those you actually have." Daisy felt Co's hand tighten almost imperceptibly on her back. But before he could respond, the lights flickered, once, twice, then died completely. The ballroom plunged into absolute darkness. Not the romantic dimness of mood lighting. Total, suffocating black, and Daisy's mind shattered. No. The walls closing, the ceiling pressing down, the air disappearing into her lungs that wouldn't expand, that couldn't expand, couldn't breathe. She couldn't see, couldn't hear past the rushing in her ears, couldn't feel anything except the terror that turned her blood to ice and her bones to water. This was dying. This was what dying felt like. Somewhere distant, Seo's voice. Daisy. Daisy, look at me. Couldn't look. Couldn't see. Blind and drowning, and the darkness had teeth and claws, and it was eating her from the inside. Then hands on her face. Cool fingers against burning skin. And Seo's voice, closer now. Cutting through the panic. Count with me. 1. She couldn't. Her mouth wouldn't work. 1, Daisy. With me. 1. 1. A whisper. Barely sound. 2. 2. 3. Breathe on 3. In through your nose. She tried. Failed. Tried again. A tiny sip of air that felt like swallowing glass. 4. I'm here. You feel my hands? His palms on her face. Solid. Real. Anchoring. 5. You're not alone in the dark. The rushing in her ears began to quiet. Marginally. Just enough to hear him. 6. Listen to me. The shadows belong to me, Daisy. And because you are with me, they will not dare to touch you. Breathe. His voice dropped an octave, a vibration she felt in her own chest more than she heard. The words settled over her like a physical barrier between her terror and the void, solid despite being made only of sound and certainty. Something about that cut through. The absolute certainty in his voice. The impossible promise that he could control something as primal as shadow. 7. Open your eyes. They are open. Her voice shook. Then see me anyway. And somehow, impossibly, she did. Not visually, but she felt him. His presence like a wall between her and the void. His breath steady while hers fractured. His heartbeat slow and strong when she managed to press her palm against his chest. 8. Better? No. Liar. There was almost humor in his voice. You stopped counting in your head. That means you're listening to me instead. He was right. The counting that normally ran on loop in her mind had quieted, replaced by his voice, his numbers, his presence. 9. The emergency lights will come on in approximately 30 seconds. When they do, every person in this room will see me on the floor with you. They'll see the Shadow King kneeling in his tuxedo, holding a woman having a panic attack. His thumbs moved across her cheekbones. I don't kneel for anyone, Daisy. Remember that. Why? She couldn't finish. Because you matter more than my reputation. Simple, final. 10. The emergency lights blazed to life. Harsh, red-tinted, turning the ballroom into something from a nightmare. And there they were, exactly as Seo had described. Him on the dirty floor, expensive suit forgotten, arms around her while she shook apart in front of Chicago's elite. Camera phones appeared immediately. Whispers ignited like brush fire. Seo ignored all of it. Can you stand? Daisy nodded, not trusting her voice. He helped her up with infinite care, his body blocking her from the closest cameras, his jacket suddenly around her shoulders despite the venue's heat. We're leaving, he announced to no one in particular. Then, directly to the governor who stood frozen 6 feet away. Your sabotage failed. Try again, and I'll broadcast more than broken bones. He guided Daisy through the crowd that parted like water, his hand never leaving her back, his body a shield between her and every phone, every stare, every judgment. In the car, Daisy finally found her voice. You didn't have to do that. Do what? Ruin your image to save me from a panic attack. Seo looked at her fully, city lights painting his face in neon and shadow. My image is a weapon I choose when to deploy. Your safety isn't negotiable. He paused. Besides, they needed to see that touching you has consequences, even if the touch is psychological. Was that strategic then? The floor? The tenderness? Some of it, his honesty cut. But not the part where I told you that you matter. The admission settled between them. Heavy and undeniable. Daisy watched the city blur past, her heartbeat finally slowing to something resembling normal. I hate that I'm weak. You're not weak. You're wired to survive in impossible circumstances. Your brain learned to protect you the only way it knew how. Seo's voice softened almost imperceptibly. That's not weakness. That's a superpower with side effects. She looked at him then, really looked, at the man who'd destroyed people for her, who'd knelt on a public floor, who'd whispered her through darkness with a patience that seemed impossible from someone so violent. Thank you, she said quietly. Thank me by staying alive. He turned away, jaw tight. Because I'm running out of ways to protect you from the wars I've started. But as they drove through Chicago's electric night, Daisy realized she didn't want protection anymore. She wanted vengeance. Morning came soft through the penthouse windows, gold light painting everything in temporary peace. Daisy woke to the smell of coffee. Real coffee. not the instant powder she'd survived on for years, and the sound of rain beginning its daily assault on the city. She found Seo on the balcony, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to his elbows, smoke from his cigarette curling into gray sky. He looked almost human like this, almost vulnerable. "You smoke?" She stepped outside, stealing his coffee cup. "Sometimes, when I'm thinking about mistakes. Am I a mistake?" He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. "You're the most complicated problem I've ever tried to solve." He took his coffee back. "Which is saying something." They stood in silence, watching Chicago wake up. Garbage trucks and taxi horns, and the distant wail of sirens that never really stopped. It felt domestic, normal, like they were two people having morning coffee instead of a crime lord and the woman who'd accidentally armed his enemies. Then Seo's phone buzzed. Once, twice, the third time, he answered, his expression transformed. Not fear. Seo didn't do fear, but something close. Recognition of a threat he hadn't calculated. "Turn on the television," he said flatly, ending the call. Inside, Daisy found the remote with shaking hands. Every channel showed the same thing, a press conference. A woman in a perfectly tailored blue suit, hair silver and elegant, eyes red from crying. Governor Barbara Vance, Daisy's mother. The sound came up mid-sentence. "My daughter Daisy is fragile. She's struggled with mental illness since childhood. And now she's been taken by this criminal." An artistic pause, a tear rolling down a practiced cheek. "I'm begging you, Mr. Seo. Whatever you think she witnessed, whatever use you have for her, she's sick. She needs help, not exploitation." The camera zoomed in on a photograph the governor held up. The girl in the photo looked like a ghost wearing Daisy's face. Hollow cheeks carved into skull-like prominence. Eyes that had gone somewhere far away and forgotten how to come back. Hospital gown hanging off skeletal shoulders, the kind of thin that came from giving up on living. Daisy remembered when that photo was taken. The sterile smell of the psychiatric ward. Industrial cleaner trying to mask the scent of desperation and medication. The cold of the examination table against her back. The way her mother had stood just outside the frame, checking her watch, calculating how long this performance needed to last before she could leave and return to work. "Smile, darling," Barbara had said. "The doctors need to see you're cooperative." But Daisy hadn't been cooperative. She'd been medicated into submission, her protests about what she'd witnessed labeled as paranoid delusions, her attempts to tell the truth reframed as concerning fixations on authority figures. Every word she'd spoken had been twisted, documented, used as evidence of her instability. The photo captured the moment she'd finally stopped fighting, stopped trying to convince anyone she was telling the truth. The moment she'd learned that sometimes survival meant pretending to be the thing people accused you of being. That was taken during her hospitalization at 16, the governor continued. After her first suicide attempt, she's been in and out of treatment ever since, and now a known gang leader has her, and her voice broke beautifully. "I just want my baby girl home." The remote fell from Daisy's hand. Seo appeared beside her, watching the screen with clinical focus. "Is any of that true? The photograph is real." Daisy's voice sounded distant. "I was hospitalized. I did struggle, but not because I was mentally ill." She finally looked at him. "Because she made me watch her take a bribe from a pharmaceutical company. $2 million to fast-track a drug that killed people. I was 15. I threatened to tell. She had me committed instead." The television continued its character assassination. Doctors testifying about Daisy's delusional episodes. Teachers describing her concerning behavior. A carefully constructed narrative that painted her as unreliable, unstable, unbelievable. "She's destroying your credibility before you can destroy hers," Seo observed. "It's efficient. It's evil." Daisy's hands curled into fists. "She didn't give me up to protect her career. She gave me up because I was evidence. A witness who wouldn't stay quiet. And now she's using that same tactic." Seo turned off the television. "The city thinks I kidnapped a mentally ill young woman. Even if we expose the senator, no one will believe testimony from someone the governor just painted as delusional. So she wins." "She thinks she wins." Seo moved to his desk, pulling up files on his computer. "But she made a mistake. She assumed you'd break under public scrutiny. That you'd hide. What if I want to hide?" He looked at her then. Really looked. And his expression was fiercer than any violence he'd shown. "I can wipe the slate clean. You can wake up tomorrow in Paris or Tokyo. a ghost with no history. But I see the way you look at the screen, Daisy. You don't want to disappear. You want to be the one holding the match. He was right. Something had crystallized in Daisy during the past 2 weeks. All the running, all the hiding, all the years spent making herself invisible. They'd kept her alive but never let her live. What's the alternative? We go to war with the most powerful woman in Illinois. Seo's smile was blade sharp. We prove she's corrupt. We destroy her credibility, the way she just destroyed yours. And we do it so thoroughly that even her allies won't be able to save her. How? You go back to her, publicly. Let the cameras see a tearful reunion. His eyes glittered. And you wear a wire. The plan was insane, suicidal, exactly the kind of desperate gambit that only worked in movies. Daisy took a shaking breath. When do we start? The escape was choreographed like theater. Seo arranged for a distraction, a fire alarm in the building's east wing, while Daisy fled through the parking garage. News crews caught her on camera, disheveled and crying, running toward waiting police cars. The reunion happened on the governor's mansion steps, live-streamed across every platform. Barbara Vance embraced her daughter with the perfect amount of maternal desperation, murmuring comforting lies into Daisy's hair while cameras captured every angle. My baby, my sweet girl, you're safe now. Daisy played her role flawlessly, trembling, hollow-eyed, defeated, the daughter who'd been rescued from a monster. Inside, beneath clothes chosen specifically for their looseness, she wore a wire so old school it didn't register on electronic sweeps. Analog, mechanical, the kind of tech people forgot to look for. The mansion smelled exactly as Daisy remembered. Lilies from the arrangements, Barbara insisted on having fresh, daily, furniture polish applied with obsessive regularity, and underneath it all, the faint chemical scent of ambition that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. The silence was too perfect. No ambient noise from traffic despite being only blocks from a main thoroughfare. No sounds of staff moving through distant rooms despite the mansion requiring a full team to maintain. Even the grandfather clock in the foyer, a family heirloom Barbara loved to mention in interviews, ticked with a mechanical precision that felt ominous rather than comforting. Daisy's heels clicked on marble floor, each step echoing in the cavernous entryway. The wire taped against her ribs itched, the adhesive pulling at her skin with every breath. Sweat trickled down her spine despite the climate-controlled perfection of the interior. She was alone here. Truly alone. If something went wrong, if Barbara discovered the wire before Daisy got what she needed, no one would hear her scream in this soundproofed monument to power. The servants were invisible the way Barbara preferred. Present but unobtrusive. Trained to anticipate needs without requiring instruction. Daisy caught glimpses of them in doorways, shadows that retreated the moment she looked directly at them. She wondered if any of them would help her if Barbara turned violent. Probably not. Loyalty bought with generous salaries and the implicit threat of destroyed careers was loyalty nonetheless. The grandfather clock continued its relentless marking of time. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Each second was one Daisy had to maintain the performance. One moment closer to either salvation or disaster. They'd only been inside 10 minutes before Barbara's mask cracked. Tea? She offered, voice still sweet for any potential listening devices. Please. Barbara poured with practiced elegance, then checked her phone. Whatever she saw there satisfied her. She set down the pot and looked at Daisy with eyes that had never held maternal warmth. You've caused quite a mess, darling. The transformation was instant. Loving mother to cold sociopath in the space between breaths. I didn't mean to. Don't. Barbara cut her off. Don't insult me with that frightened rabbit act. It worked when you were 15. It doesn't work now. She sipped her tea. Seo Sangwoo's protection taught you to wear confidence like armor. I can see it. So drop the performance and tell me what he wants. Daisy forced her hands to shake, just slightly. Enough to seem genuine. He wants the SIM cards. He thinks you know where they are. Of course I know where they are. I'm the one who arranged for them to be stolen in the first place. Barbara smiled. Those cards contain evidence of every illegal deal, every bribe, every body buried by people in power, including me, including the senator, including Zhang Wei. Zhang has them now. No, Zhang has copies, worthless without the encryption keys. Barbara leaned forward. Which I possess, along with enough leverage to destroy every person in that club the night you ruined everything. Daisy's pulse raced. This was the confession. Every word captured on the wire pressed against her skin. Why did you send those men to the Dominion? To retrieve the originals before Zhang could. But you, Barbara's voice dripped contempt. You got in the way, clumsy, stupid, just like always. You ordered them to hurt me. I ordered them to retrieve property. What they did to you was, Barbara waved her hand dismissively, collateral damage. Honestly, darling, you've always been so dramatic about these things. The casual cruelty landed like a physical blow. But Daisy kept her face neutral, kept playing the broken daughter. What happens now? Now? Barbara's smile widened. Now you disappear, permanently this time. A tragic suicide. The mentally ill daughter who couldn't handle the stress of her captivity. The papers will run sympathetic pieces. I'll cry at your funeral, and all of this goes away. People will suspect. People will believe what I tell them to believe. They always have. Barbara stood, moving to the sideboard where a bottle of pills sat. Prescription. Legal. Deadly in sufficient quantity. We'll make it look like an overdose. Painless, really. More mercy than you deserve after what you've cost me. Daisy's hand moved to the necklace Seo had given her. The panic button disguised as a center stone. One press. That's all it would take. But if she called him now, they'd know about the wire. Barbara would destroy the evidence before police arrived. This had to play out. You won't get away with this, Daisy whispered. I already have, darling. I've been getting away with it for 30 years. Barbara poured pills into her palm. The only question is whether you take these willingly, or whether I have my security hold you down. Your choice. You're my mother. I'm a politician who made a mistake 24 years ago. Barbara's voice went flat. Keeping you alive was sentimental, useful, even. The voters love a mother struggling with a troubled child. It polls well. But you've outlived your purpose. The wire against Daisy's skin felt like fire. Every word captured, every confession recorded. She looked up at the woman who'd given her life and spent 2 decades trying to erase her. And something inside her finally, completely broke free. You're right, Daisy said softly. I was always too weak for your world. Barbara smiled, victorious. Finally, some self-awareness. Too weak to become what you are. Daisy stood slowly. Too weak to kill my own daughter. Too weak to trade lives for campaign contributions. Barbara's expression shifted. What are you? But you know what I'm strong enough for? Daisy pulled the wire from beneath her shirt, the small recorder still running, red light steady. You confused silence for weakness, Mother. You thought because I didn't scream, I wasn't fighting. But I was listening. I've always been listening. And now, she tapped the device against her chest. The whole world is going to hear you, the color drained from Barbara's face. Every word, Daisy continued, voice steady now, stronger than it had ever been. Every confession, every threat, all recorded, all admissible, all about to be delivered to the FBI, the press, and everyone you've terrorized into silence. You can't. I already did, Mom. The word dripped acid. While you were monologuing like a bad movie villain, you destroyed yourself. And the best part? Daisy smiled, and it felt like freedom. You taught me how. All those years watching you manipulate, calculate, destroy. I learned. I just learned to use it differently. Barbara moved fast, grabbing for the recorder. But Daisy was faster. Years of hypervigilance making her reflexes sharp. She twisted away, backing toward the door. Security will stop you. Your security isn't coming, Barbara. Half of them took a payout from Seo 10 minutes ago. The ones who didn't are currently locked in the gatehouse, wondering why their radios stopped working. Daisy's hand found the door handle. You're alone, Barbara. For the first time in your life, you're completely alone. The sound of sirens grew louder outside, blue lights painting the mansion's windows. Barbara Vance stood in her perfect home in her perfect suit, and for the first time, Daisy saw her as what she really was. Small, powerless, human. You'll regret this, Barbara hissed. Maybe. Daisy opened the door to waiting agents, to cameras, to the end of everything her mother had built on corpses and lies. But I'll regret it free. As they led Barbara away in handcuffs, the governor's mask finally cracked completely. She screamed Daisy's name, cursed, threatened, and Daisy turned away, walking toward the car where Seo waited, not looking back even once. In the car, Seo examined her face. You got everything? Daisy pulled the recorder from her pocket, pressing play. Barbara's voice filled the space, cold and incriminating. I ordered them to retrieve property. What they did to you was collateral damage. Everything, Daisy confirmed. Good. Seo pulled into traffic, driving them away from the mansion. The cameras, the chaos. Now the real war begins. Zhang still has those cards. The network will fracture without the governor holding it together. And you? He glanced at her. You just painted a target on yourself that won't fade. I know. So what do you want to do? Run? Hide? I can still arrange. No. Daisy watched Chicago stream past the window, the city that had almost destroyed her and somehow, impossibly, given her back herself. I'm tired of running, tired of being invisible, tired of letting powerful people decide if I get to exist. Then what? She looked at him. The Shadow King, the monster who'd knelt for her in public, the man who'd taught her that survival and strength weren't opposites. I want to fight. I want to finish this. She paused, the words both terrifying and liberating. I want to burn down everyone who thought I was too weak to matter. Sio's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Then let's declare war. The Dominion felt different now. What had been a sanctuary of wealth and secrets had transformed into a fortress under siege. Seo's people had locked down every entrance, armed the security systems, and turned the top-floor office into a command center that smelled like gun oil and desperation. Daisy stood at the window overlooking the city that wanted her dead, watching red and blue lights multiply in the streets below. The recording of her mother's confession sat on Seo's desk, encrypted and ready to upload to every major network simultaneously. One button. That's all it would take to destroy Barbara Vance forever. But the governor wasn't waiting for the upload. They're moving. Seo's lieutenant, a woman named Min, with scars on her knuckles and ice in her voice, pointed to the live security feeds. Not police. Contractors. Daisy leaned closer. The men surrounding the building wore no insignia, carried weapons that weren't standard issue, and moved with the coordination of trained killers. 30 of them, maybe more. Black Ops, Seo said quietly, watching the screens with clinical focus. Your mother called in favors. These aren't men who arrest people, Daisy. They erase them. Her pulse should have spiked. Fear should have flooded her system. Instead, she felt something colder settle in her chest. The same calculation she'd seen in Seo's eyes 100 times. If this was how she died, she'd make it count. How long do we have? Minutes. They'll breach simultaneously from 4 entry points, flood the stairs and elevators, trap us here. He glanced at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. There's a service elevator in my private office. You could take it to the parking garage. My driver is waiting. No, Daisy. I said no. She turned from the window, meeting his gaze fully. I'm not running while you fight my war. This stopped being just your war the moment I broke those men on camera. His voice gentled almost imperceptibly. You don't owe me your life. I know. She moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into his features, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. But you're not dying alone in this building to save me. Not after everything. Seo studied her face like he was memorizing it. Then he pulled a gun from his desk, compact, efficient, deadly, and placed it in her hands. Safety here. Point and shoot. Aim for center mass. And if they get past me, they won't. If they do, he continued, voice hardening, you go to the emergency panel behind that painting. Code is 000 enter. It triggers the Hell on Fire suppression system. I had the safeties removed and the concentration tripled. Takes 30 seconds to activate, then fills the room with gas that displaces all oxygen instantly. Anyone without a mask suffocates in less than a minute. Daisy looked at the gun in her hands, its weight both terrifying and oddly comforting. That's your contingency? Suffocation? It's effective. He pulled on tactical gear with practiced efficiency. Kevlar that molded to his frame, weapons holstered with professional precision. And it gives us one advantage. You can hold your breath longer than most people. All those panic attacks taught you to control your breathing. Use that. The lights went out. Not a power failure. A cut. Surgical and deliberate. Emergency lighting kicked in. Red glow that turned the office into something from a nightmare. They're inside. Min reported, voice steady despite the chaos erupting on the security feeds. Ground floor breached. Stairwells compromised. We've got maybe 3 minutes before. Gunfire. Close enough to hear. Far enough to still prepare. Seo's people took defensive positions. 8 of them against 30 trained killers. Impossible odds. The kind of mathematics that ended with body bags. Daisy found herself moving to the window, pressing her back against the wall beside it, gun heavy in her hands. From this angle, she could see the building across the street. Office space, mostly dark except for one floor where a single light burned. Then she saw it. The reflection in the window glass. A tiny red dot, barely visible, tracking movement across the office. Seo. Her voice cut through the controlled chaos. Sniper. 10 o'clock. He moved instantly, dropping below the window line just as glass exploded inward. The bullet meant for his chest buried itself in the wall behind his desk, showering them with plaster and splinters. Clever girl, he breathed, eyes meeting hers across the red-lit room. The door to the office shuddered. Once, twice. Hydraulic battering ram. They had maybe 30 seconds before it gave way. Daisy's mind raced through options, cataloging details the way she'd been trained, by life, by trauma, by Seo's brutal education in survival. The sniper couldn't see them below window level. The door would breach. The Hull-on system needed 30 seconds to activate and another 30 to take effect. 60 seconds. An eternity in combat. Then her gaze landed on the wet bar in the corner. Crystal decanters. Expensive scotch. And behind them, visible through the glass shelving, the exposed fuse box that powered the office's backup lighting. I have an idea, she said. Seo looked at her, then at the fuse box, then back at her. Understanding flickered across his face. That's insane. You have a better one? The door shuddered again, wood beginning to splinter. Do it, Seo ordered. Then to his people. Masks. Everyone. Now. Daisy grabbed the nearest decanter. Red wine, full, heavy as a weapon. She calculated trajectory, distance, the angle she'd need to hit liquid against electrical current. Every physics lesson she'd half forgotten. Every pool game she'd watched in bars where she'd been invisible. The door burst open. Men poured through. Tactical gear, night vision, weapons trained and ready. Daisy threw. The decanter arced through red-lit air, spinning, catching light like a garnet comet. It hit the fuse box dead center. Crystal shattered. Wine exploded across exposed wiring. A massive electrical arc flashed. A blinding white supernova in the confined space. The mercenaries screamed, tearing at their faces. The sudden, intense flash had overloaded their night vision goggles, white-outing their view and temporarily blinding them. Then the system died. Total, absolute darkness descended. The kind of darkness Daisy had lived in, breathed in. Learned to navigate when her mind tried to kill her with phantom walls and disappearing air. This was her domain. The suffocating black that had been her prison for years had just become her weapon. Her senses heightened immediately. Years of panic attacks in locked rooms, teaching her body to map spaces without sight. She heard the tactical footsteps of the soldiers, heavy boots on marble, the slight scrape of equipment against door frames. She smelled their gun oil, the synthetic fabric of their gear, the nervous sweat that even trained men couldn't suppress when stripped of their primary sense. She counted their breaths. Shallow, rapid, panicking already. The night vision that should have been their advantage was useless against absolute darkness. No ambient light to amplify, no heat signatures clear enough to navigate by in the first critical seconds. While they were blind and disoriented, Daisy moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent countless hours memorizing exit routes and distances. 3 steps left would bring her to the corner of Seo's desk. She could feel the edge with her fingertips. 5 more steps forward, staying low, would position her against the north wall where the emergency panel waited. This wasn't terror. This was transcendence. Every panic attack she'd survived, every locked room she'd endured, every moment she'd forced herself to breathe when her body screamed that there was no air. All of it had been training for this moment. The soldiers shouted to each other, their voices betraying location and fear in equal measure. She heard equipment clattering as they stumbled, the thud of bodies colliding in the dark, the sharp curse when someone's weapon discharged by accident. Daisy crawled past them like a ghost, her years of making herself invisible finally serving a purpose beyond mere survival. She was a shadow among shadows, a whisper of movement they couldn't track, couldn't target, couldn't stop. She moved on instinct, muscle memory from endless hours locked in that safe room. 3 steps left. Drop to crouch. The desk was here. She could feel its corner. Seo's hand found her shoulder, his touch the only point of warmth in the void. Panel, he whispered. Behind the painting. North wall. The men in tactical gear were shouting, their night vision useless against absolute darkness. Their training suddenly worthless when every sense except touch disappeared. Daisy crawled. Her hands found carpet, then hardwood, then the textured surface of the wall. The painting, she remembered it hanging at chest height. Abstract art that had meant nothing until now. Her fingers traced its edges, found the frame, pushed. It swung away. Behind it, the panel. Cold metal under her palm. 0, 0, 0, enter. She hesitated for one heartbeat. This would kill everyone in the room without masks, including some of CO's people who hadn't gotten their gear on in time. Do it, CO's voice. Close, certain. They knew the risks. Daisy pressed the button. A mechanical hiss filled the darkness. Then a sound like wind being born. The Halon system activating, pumping gas into the sealed room, stealing oxygen molecule by molecule. Time dissolved into heartbeats. 1. A shout from the doorway. 2. The sound of a boot hitting a desk. 3. The mechanical hiss was a whisper of death, invisible and odorless, filling the room with the inevitability of a rising tide. Daisy could already feel it. The air thinning, her lungs working harder, the old panic starting to claw at her chest. No air, no space, can't breathe. But she'd done this before. Survived worse than this. She forced her breathing to slow, to shallow, to sip air instead of gulping it. 1, 2, 3. Around them, men began to choke. Confusion turned to panic. Someone fired blindly. Bullets thudding into walls, into furniture, into flesh that screamed and went silent. 4, 5, 6. Seo's hand found hers in the darkness, pressing something plastic and hard against her face. A mask. He'd kept one for her even though he'd told his people to gear up. Breathe, he ordered. She did. Oxygen flooded her lungs, sweet and cold and alive. 7, 8, 9. The sounds of choking intensified. Bodies hitting the floor, desperate scraping as men tried to find doors, windows, any escape from the invisible death filling their lungs. 10, 11, 12. Then silence. Absolute and complete. Emergency lights flickered back on. Dim, battery-powered, revealing a room full of still bodies. CO's people stood among the fallen, masks obscuring their faces, weapons trained on anything that moved. Nothing moved. Daisy pulled off her mask with shaking hands, staring at the carnage she'd caused. 30 men, dead, because she'd thrown a decanter of wine and pressed a button. Don't, CO said, reading her expression. Don't carry their deaths. They came here to kill you, to silence truth, to protect corruption. He pulled off his own mask, and his face was grim but steady. You didn't murder them, Daisy. You survived them. She wanted to believe that. Needed to believe it. The recording? Her voice came out rough. Min was already at the computer, fingers flying across keys. Uploading now. Every network, every news outlet, social media. It'll hit simultaneously in 3, 2, 1. The screens around them blazed to life. Barbara Vance's voice filled the air, cold and incriminating. I ordered them to retrieve property. What they did to you was collateral damage. Then the footage from the wire. The pills, the threats, the casual cruelty of a mother planning her daughter's murder. Daisy watched her mother's empire begin to crumble in real time. News alerts, trending hashtags, emergency broadcasts. By the time the bodies were carried out of the Dominion, Barbara Vance had been arrested, her allies had scattered, and the city was screaming for justice. Seo found Daisy on the balcony hours later, watching dawn paint the city gold. Smoke still rose from the streets where riots had started and been contained. The evidence she'd gathered would destroy dozens of powerful people. The recording would be played in courtrooms for months. You did it, he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. We did it. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. But it doesn't feel like winning. Winning never does. Not this kind. He was close enough now that she could feel the heat of him, smell the smoke and sweat and copper that clung to his clothes. But you're alive. That's something. Daisy finally turned to face him. This man who'd saved her, used her, trained her, protected her, who'd knelt on a ballroom floor and whispered her through darkness, who'd fought impossible odds because she'd asked him not to die alone. What happens now? She asked. CO's expression shifted, something softer breaking through the armor he wore like a second skin. Now you decide what you want. Freedom, safety, a new life somewhere I can't touch. And if I don't want that? His hand came up, fingers brushing her jaw with devastating gentleness. Then you tell me what you do want. The answer should have been simple. But as Daisy looked at Seo Sang-woo, monster, savior, man, she realized wanting had never been her problem. It was admitting it. The courtroom smelled like old wood and new fear. Daisy sat in the witness section, hands folded in her lap, watching Barbara Vance perform innocence with Emmy-worthy precision. Tailored gray suit, hair pulled back simply. No jewelry except a delicate cross at her throat. The image of maternal suffering. Your Honor. Barbara's lawyer intoned, voice dripping sympathy. My client is the victim here. Her troubled daughter, manipulated by known criminals, has fabricated evidence to... We have the recordings, the prosecutor cut in. Unedited, authenticated. Miss Vance's own voice admitting to conspiracy, attempted murder. Recordings obtained through illegal surveillance. Coerced testimony. A mentally unstable young woman with a documented history of... Daisy stopped listening. She'd heard these arguments for 3 weeks. The defense painting her as delusional, the prosecution trying to prove her lucid. Both sides treating her like evidence instead of human. Across the courtroom, CO sat in the defendant's section. He faced separate charges for the livestream violence, though public opinion had shifted dramatically after Barbara's arrest. He looked untouchable in charcoal gray, like he'd wandered into the wrong building and decided to stay out of boredom. His eyes met hers, a question in them. Are you ready? Daisy nodded, one sharp dip of her chin. The defense calls Daisy Francis to the stand. The walk to the witness box felt endless. Every eye in the courtroom tracked her. Journalists, activists, politicians who'd survived Barbara's fall and wanted to distance themselves from the wreckage. Daisy wore white because Seo had told her to. Something about optics, about looking innocent and otherworldly and untouchable. The oath, the settling into the chair. Then Barbara's lawyer approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Francis, or should I say Daisy Vance? He used her mother's name like a weapon. You've had quite the transformation. From hospitalized mental patient to, what would you call yourself now? A survivor. Her voice came out steady. All those hours of training with CO's people, learning to control her breathing, her tone, her presence. A survivor. He nodded slowly. Let's talk about your mental health history. You were hospitalized at 16, correct? Yes. For attempting suicide? For being inconvenient. The answer made the gallery murmur. I witnessed my mother take a bribe. She had me committed to discredit me. That's your claim. But the medical records show severe anxiety, depression, psychotic episodes. I had panic attacks in locked rooms. That's not psychosis. That's trauma response. Daisy leaned forward slightly. And every episode happened after my mother visited. Funny how that works. The lawyer's smile tightened. You expect this court to believe that Governor Vance, a woman who's dedicated her life to public service, would institutionalize her own daughter to cover up corruption? I don't expect you to believe anything. Daisy's voice dropped. I expect you to listen to the recording. Her voice, her words, her admission that she ordered men to assault me, to kill me, to make it look like suicide. She paused. Unless you're suggesting I fabricated her voice, that I'm so talented at manipulation I can fake audio that passed FBI authentication? Silence stretched. The lawyer consulted his notes, regrouping. Let's discuss your relationship with Mr. CO. You're aware he's a known criminal? I'm aware he saved my life when powerful men attacked me. I'm aware he protected me when my own mother wanted me dead. I'm aware. Daisy met Barbara's eyes across the courtroom. That the criminal you're talking about has more honor than the woman who gave birth to me. Barbara's mask cracked. Just for a second. A flash of rage before professional composure reasserted itself. Your Honor, the prosecutor stood. Permission to play the recording again. In full. So the jury can hear exactly what Miss Francis survived. The judge nodded. The courtroom went silent. Then Barbara's voice filled the space. Now you disappear, permanently this time. A tragic suicide. Daisy watched the jury's faces, saw belief settle in. Horror, understanding. When the recording ended, several were crying. No further questions, the defense attorney said quietly. The prosecutor stood. Miss Francis, one final question. Do you believe your mother is guilty of the charges against her? Daisy looked at Barbara, really looked. At the woman who'd spent 9 years erasing her, silencing her, trying to make her disappear. I believe my mother is guilty of everything she's accused of and crimes we haven't discovered yet. Her voice didn't shake. I believe she spent decades destroying anyone who threatened her power. I believe she would have killed me without hesitation. Daisy's hands were steady on the witness stand rail. And I believe she should spend the rest of her life in a cell as small as the rooms she locked me in. The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing, 25 to life. Barbara Vance was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, her perfect composure finally shattered. She screamed Daisy's name, called her ungrateful, traitorous, evil. Daisy didn't turn around, just walked out of the courthouse into camera flashes and shouted questions. Seo's presence at her back, a steady anchor. "How do you feel?" A reporter thrust a microphone at her. "Tired." True answer. Honest. And free. The Dominion reopened 3 months later. Not as Seo's club, as Daisy's. She'd bought it with money she'd earned testifying, consulting with the FBI, helping dismantle the network her mother had built. Blood money, maybe. But she'd bled for it. The interior had been redesigned. Brighter, less oppressive, still exclusive, but with an edge of danger that kept the right kind of clientele coming back. Daisy had hired new security. Women, mostly. People who understood what it meant to feel unsafe in places that should be sanctuaries. She stood at the bar on opening night, wearing black silk that moved like armor, watching her staff work with the kind of attention to detail she'd once used to catalog threats. Now she used it to build something. Protect people. Create the kind of space she'd needed and never had. The atmosphere had transformed completely, where before there had been an undercurrent of predatory entitlement. Men in suits taking what they wanted, staff invisible and disposable. Now there was something different. The confidence wasn't performative. The power wasn't borrowed. The staff moved through the space with genuine authority, not the careful subservience Daisy remembered from her own shifts. She'd hired Keisha first, the young waitress who'd been working table 6 the night everything exploded. Then others like her, people who'd survived things, who understood that strength came in different forms, who knew how to read a room for danger and diffuse it before it escalated. The VIP section still existed, but the soundproof glass had been replaced with something more transparent. No more hidden corners where powerful people could act with impunity. Everything visible, everything accountable. Diversity of the crowd was intentional. Tech entrepreneurs next to artists, politicians who'd survived corruption scandals next to activists who'd exposed them, old money mixing with new in a way that felt less like mingling and more like careful observation. Everyone watching everyone else. Power balanced by accountability. Daisy walked through the room not as a ghost trying to disappear, but as someone who owned the space she occupied. Heads turned not with the aggressive assessment she remembered, but with something closer to respect. Women especially seemed to track her movement, noting the confidence, the subtle tells that she could protect herself. The message her presence sent. This is different now. This is safe. Champagne, Miss Francis? Her bartender, a woman named Ray with forearms like carved marble, offered a glass. Water. Daisy never drank. Control mattered too much. Movement at the VIP entrance. A man in expensive casual wear, gesturing too aggressively at one of the new waitresses. A young woman named Keisha, who looked terrified. Daisy was moving before she thought about it, crossing the floor with the kind of predatory focus Seo had taught her. She stopped beside Keisha, her presence making the man pause mid-gesture. "Is there a problem?" Daisy's voice was pleasant, empty. "This girl won't seat me. I have a reservation. Keisha doesn't seat guests who make her uncomfortable." "House policy." Daisy smiled. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable elsewhere." "Do you know who I am?" He pulled out his phone like it was a weapon. "I know the owner. I could have you. I am the owner." Daisy stepped closer, and something in her expression made the man step back. "And you're leaving. Now." He looked past her, scanning for help, backup, someone to reinforce his importance. His gaze landed on the corner booth, half hidden in shadows. Seo sat there, watching, not interfering, just present. A reminder of what happened to people who made threats in this building. The man went pale, turned, walked quickly toward the exit. Daisy checked on Keisha. "You okay?" Received a shaky nod. Then moved to the corner booth where Seo waited with 2 glasses of whiskey. "You didn't need me," he observed. "No." She slid into the seat across from him. "But it's good to know you're there. Always." Simple word. Infinite weight. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the club pulse with life. Music and conversation, and the kind of energy that came from people feeling safe enough to relax, dangerous enough to be interesting. "Your mother's trial made you famous," Seo said eventually. "The waitress who took down a governor. Networks want interviews. Publishing houses want your story. I know." Daisy sipped her water. I'm saying no to all of it. Why? Because I spent 24 years being invisible, then 3 months being hypervisible. I'm tired of being anyone's story. She looked at him fully. I just want to be. Seo's expression shifted. Something softer breaking through. And what do you want to be? The question hung between them. Weighted with every moment since that night at the Dominion. The violence, the protection, the darkness they'd survived together. Yours. The admission came out quieter than she intended. If you'll have me, not as property, not as debt, just as a choice I'm making with clear eyes. Seo reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I've been yours since I broke bones on camera for you, possibly before. His thumb traced circles on her wrist. The question is whether you can live with what I am. A criminal. A monster. No hesitation. Who will destroy anyone who threatens you? Who doesn't apologize for violence? Who built an empire on fear and will burn it to ash before letting you get hurt? Daisy turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. I don't need a hero, Seo. Heroes follow rules. I need the monster who burned the world down because I asked him to. I need the shadow that keeps the other monsters away. She squeezed his hand. I can live with the darkness. I was born in it. Seo's answering smile was sharp, proud, devastating. I'm counting on it. The television above the bar flickered. Breaking news. A reporter's urgent voice. Former Illinois Governor Barbara Vance was found dead in her cell this morning. Officials are calling it suicide, though questions remain about the circumstances. Daisy watched the report with expressionless features, then checked her watch. Expensive timepiece Seo had given her, with modifications she'd requested. Custom work. Untraceable. She took a sip of water. Set down the glass. Met Seo's gaze across the table. Terrible tragedy, she said neutrally. Terrible, he agreed. There was something in his eyes. Respect. Recognition. Maybe love in the only language men like him understood. Neither of them said anything else about it. Some questions were better left unasked. Outside the Dominion, the city moved on. Another scandal. Another fallen politician. Another story of power and consequence. Inside, Daisy Francis. Survivor, owner, woman who'd learned that sometimes the only way to escape monsters was to become one. Smiled at the man who'd taught her to bite back. Stay? She asked. Always, Seo answered. And in the shadows of the Dominion, where violence had once destroyed her, Daisy Francis finally, impossibly, felt like she'd come home.